Hey everyone, welcome! I am so thrilled you're joining me for this explainer today. If you've been following the architecture and context space lately, you have absolutely seen the headlines. We're talking about this immense marketing hype promising that artificial intelligence can now autonomously design vast swaths of housing, basically revolutionizing the whole industry overnight. But, what happens when we look past the shiny press releases and dig into the actual data? Well, today, we're going to expose the reality behind these massive AI architectural deployments. We're going to use the hard data to separate the brilliant breakthroughs from the, quite frankly, expensive illusions.
Okay, let's dive into this. 86,000. Recently, Autodesk's AI reportedly achieved this incredible milestone, generating the designs for an 86,000 home development in California in a mere 90 days. I mean, when you hear that, it sounds like the housing crisis has finally met its ultimate technological match, right? Traditional workflows just cannot scale to that level in that time frame. It's an undeniably huge leap in generation speed. But here's the catch. Generating geometry is not the same thing as designing a real, buildable community.
And that brings us to a much-needed reality check from Dr. Sarah Chen over at MIT Architecture and Planning. She rightly points out that this 86,000 home achievement is, first and foremost, a compute benchmark. It's proof that servers can crunch numbers fast. But it is absolutely not a design quality benchmark. As she brilliantly summarizes it, AI accelerates the iteration process, but it doesn't just instantly spit out a final flawless design. Generating 86,000 units quickly does not mean 86,000 units are actually ready to be built.
Which leads us directly into the core theme of our explainer today, myth versus reality. The marketing promise tells you this all took 90 days, but when we track these projects through the actual permitting phase, the reality is a grueling 14 months. Why? Well, because the architectural process is deeply intertwined with local, highly specific legal and physical constraints. So when we hand off these AI-generated plans to real-world jurisdictions, that promised 90-day timeline just completely shatters. Let's look at exactly why that happens.
Section 1. The 86,000 home illusion and the code compliance crash.
Making a pretty 3D model is one thing, but making sure it strictly adheres to the International Building Code plus all of its local variants is a completely different beast. And it's where AI systems are massively struggling right now. Now, what's really interesting here is the hidden danger in these percentages. A 77% first-pass compliance rate? Honestly, that sounds pretty great for an emerging technology. But look at that 23% redesign failure rate. When you're dealing with a massive scale of 86,000 homes, a 23% failure rate means nearly 20,000 individual units require grueling manual human redesign. Suddenly, that promised autonomy just vanishes, and your human architects are left scrambling to fix thousands of AI hallucinations. So why exactly is it failing? Well, the AI might have the base International Building Code basically downloaded into its brain, but it completely whiffs on the jurisdictional nuances. The breakdown here is fascinating. In New York, for example, the AI misses 202 specific local amendments. In California, it lacks site-specific seismic soil data. It really struggles with the complex fire egress calculations required for mixed-use buildings, and it frequently miscalculates strict ADA ramp clearances. It knows the broad strokes, sure, but architecture demands absolute precision.
So, the crucial point is really in the financial breakdown. Generating the AI design only costs about 18 cents per unit. That totals just over $15,000 for the whole 86,000 unit project. Pretty incredible, right? But remember those 20,000 failed units we talked about? Human redesign costs $45 per unit. That slaps you with a staggering $890,100 hidden cost in human rework. This massive bill effectively wipes out the initial return on investment you thought you were getting from the software in the first place.
David Kim, a Coursera alum, really brings this pain home with his own experience. He noted, "The $890,000 redesign bill in month 1 killed the project. No one talks about failure rate in marketing." And it's so true. If you ignore the failure rate, the whole mathematical reality of autonomous mass housing just collapses. It literally goes from being a money-saving miracle to an absolute financial sinkhole.
Section 2. The BIM bottleneck and software limits.
But code compliance isn't the only roadblock here. Even if the AI generated absolutely perfect designs, we'd still run into severe data flow constraints when trying to integrate these massive AI outputs with the existing building information modeling, or BIM platforms, that the industry actually uses to build. 500. That is the strict, hard-capped Enterprise Revit API call limit per hour. It's essentially the speed limit for how fast the AI can talk to Revit. If you're generating 86,000 units, the math gets brutal fast. It would take 1,720 hours, that's 71 straight days, just for the API communication to transfer the data. The AI might design it in minutes, but the software pipeline literally chokes on the volume.
And because of that insane 71-day API bottleneck,
firms are forced into a pretty grueling manual workaround. First, they export the AI massing via an IFC format file. But in doing so, they experience a 12% loss of crucial parametric data. All those smart walls, they become dumb meshes. So step 3, human architects literally have to sit down and manually rebuild those mesh walls back into editable Revit families. Once again, the illusion of total autonomy breaks down under these technical limits.
Section 3, Multifamily Reality Check, Permitting, and MEP. Now let's pivot to what happens when these projects hit real-world deployment challenges. We're going to look specifically at the complexities of multifamily housing, which is honestly what we desperately need right now, and the rigorous hurdles of human permitting authorities. This perfectly illustrates the exact boundary of current AI capabilities. On one hand, we see what AI does incredibly well, site massing. It can churn out the overall volume and placement of buildings in about 40 hours, hitting 90% completion. But on the other hand, multifamily MEP stacking, that's mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, figuring out how utilities route through shared walls across multiple floors is just a massive combinatorial explosion. Here, the AI is literally at 0% completion, requiring 200 hours of manual human engineering to figure it out. The AI handles the macro stuff great, but it completely fails at the micro multifamily details.
And this lack of granular detail leads right into our next major headache. When you actually submit these plans to the city, traditional manual designs see an 88% approval rate on the first submission. But AI submissions? They drop drastically, down to just 62%. Permitting authorities fundamentally distrust the AI black box. They look at plans that might appear correct on the surface, but lack the underlying logic and calculations that actually prove they're safe to build.
AI Housing Committee Chair Jennifer Martinez really hits the nail on the head here. She says permitting authorities are AI illiterate, and that we need explainable AI, not black boxes. They constantly ask, well, how did the AI know this works? Because of this total lack of transparency, 45% of jurisdictions now legally require human architects to document and stamp the AI's logic themselves. This extra documentation phase actually adds 40% more time back onto the total project timeline, eating even further into those promised time savings we started with.
Actually, scratch that. Before we look to the future, I want to share a really surprising fact about sustainable design. We all want to build greener, using materials like mass timber, right? But there is a massive blind spot here. 95% of the data these AI models are trained on is based on steel and concrete. They completely lack the proprietary connection data for cross-laminated timber. Because of this, AI-generated mass timber designs suffer a dangerously high 40% structural peer review failure rate. The AI can size a beam just fine, but it has absolutely no idea how to connect it in the real world.
Section 4, the true ROI and the 2027 roadmap.
So, with all these bottlenecks, code failures, and permitting rejections, is AI architecture just a lost cause? Absolutely not. It's time to move past the marketing hype and rebuild our optimism with a much more pragmatic roadmap. Here is some highly actionable advice for professionals looking to turn this tool into a genuinely profitable asset. First, stop assuming total autonomy. Instead, budget for that initial 23% redesign failure rate. Then, aggressively invest upfront time. We're talking around 40 hours, custom tuning the code API specifically for your local jurisdictions. Your explicit goal here is to drive that AI failure rate under 10%, because the data shows that firms who manage to get failures below 10% actually achieve a massive 3.2 times return on investment by year 2. It's hard work, sure, but it absolutely pays off.
Okay, let's move to and see how this builds toward the future. We've evolved incredibly rapidly from basic SketchUp plugins back in 2018 to open source communities in 2022 to these crazy 86,000 unit massing milestones of 2025. But look right there at the bottom of the timeline. The highly anticipated real game changers coming in Q3 2026, the BIM native AI launch. This right here is the ultimate solution to the data flow issues we were talking about earlier. BIM native AI is an upcoming technology that bypasses those exports entirely. It generates the geometry directly inside the native Revit format. This entirely eliminates that 500 call per hour API bottleneck and completely stops that 12% parametric data loss in its tracks. Once this drops, generating 86,000 units is not going to take 71 days of API throttling. It will take an estimated 3.2 days. It's going to be huge.
Which leaves us with one final critical question to chew on. The 86,000 home illusion of today is absolutely going to become the reality of tomorrow. The early hurdles, the code failures, the API limits, these are just the messy growing pains of a revolutionary technology. AI isn't going to replace architects, but it is undeniably becoming a mandatory tool for the job. So the real question is, will your firm put in the hard work to adopt AI as a finely tuned instrument today, or will you be replaced by the firms that do? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this helped clear the smoke and left you eager to master the reality of AI design. Catch you next time.